welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and I am joined by a writer and an editor of fiction who is here to talk about a project that I had so much fun reading over the past week. I'm so excited to talk about this. Welcome to the show. Hello. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi, I am Terry J. Benton-Walker, and I am the editor and a contributor of the young adult horror anthology, The White Guy Dies First, which is 13 scary stories of fear and power from an incredible list of 13 BIPOC authors, myself included, where the white guy always dies first.
It's such a great premise for a collection, and it is such
Thank
a
you.
great collection of authors. It is like a truly monumental project. I was wondering if we could start by talking a little bit about your writing career and your journey to editing and contributing to this project. How did this one come to be?
Mhm. Yes, so the very first series that I published was the Blood Debt series, which is a young adult contemporary fantasy. And even that series has it's more of like a dark fantasy than just more of a light fantasy, right? So there's a lot of scary moments and there's some horror moments, especially in the sequel Blood Justice, which just came out this past April. And it was the same deal with my middle grade contemporary fantasy, Alex Wise versus the End of the World. There are a ton of scary moments in there to the point where I asked my editor, I was like, is this too scary for kids? And she was like, no, no, it's perfect because apparently like young kids like scary stories right now, like to be creeped out a little bit in their fantasy. So I was like, well, perfect because I cannot quit horror. And like surprisingly, I talked about like wanting to write horror so much online, and nobody ever invited me to horror anthology. So I was like, fine, I'll just do one myself. And put together a proposal, and we pitched it to Ali Fisher at Tortine, who is the editor of my Blood Debt series. And she and I worked together on refining the concept, and Tortine bought it, and they've been like a perfect partner with like putting together this collection, and I've had so much fun curating it as an editor. And interesting enough, like when we first started out, Allie asked me about like if I had any interest in like editing or being an editor in the future, and I was like, no, 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 no. I was like, I don't want to do it. I just like telling stories, and I like helping people with the editorial part of it. But I was like, I don't want to do the business side. And then when we got to the end of this project, I was like, so I take that back. I was like, I actually really, really, really enjoyed editing this anthology. I had a blast.
Yeah, it is such a fantastic collection. And I really loved your editor's note as well, speaking to,
Mhm.
your own relationship to horror and your intentions for the book. You say in it that your attachment to horror is deeply personal. Could you talk a little bit about the significance of horror for you?
Mhm. Yeah, so horror has been a part of my life since I was a small kid. And my mom used to let me we used to watch horror movies together, like all times of the night. And I was watching a lot of stuff that I probably should not have been watching because like I had nightmares. And like even though I was like scared out of my mind, I could not quit horror. And I've seen and watched like the horror genre evolve like over the years and over the decades that I've been alive. I'm 40 now. So I've been watching horror for a very long time. And it's always been a medium that's been like more than just about like scares and like blood and gore and monsters and ghosts on the surface. Like to me, the best horror stories have been the ones that have been used as a vehicle to like explore some darker part of just like humanity or society at large, or just something scary about the world that we live in that's even more terrifying than like the monsters and everything else. And so like, I really like that about horror, but also like alternatively, people of color, especially Black people, have not had a good time in horror because we're typically the people that die first, and like we serve the white savior. And I wanted a collection that hit on those themes and like that note of that like underlying horror that like speaks to like the true horrors in the world, but also a story where people of color can take back our power and our roles in these stories.
Ah, that is such an
Yeah.
awesome driving force for a collection
Hmm.
to sort of attack those tropes and also provide like a new perspective into horror. Because something I think
Hmm.
about all the time with horror is that like, fear is universal, but like
Yes.
what is scary can be very like culturally specific or historically
Hmm.
specific and all these other factors. So horror can like give you really like intimate glimpses into like lived experiences. Is that something that like
Yes.
you thought about while, curating stories and sending out
Mhm.
calls and things like that?
Absolutely. It's more so something that I thought about like while I was working with each contributor editorially, because as I said before, like each story has a deeper meaning, and it was really fun for me as an editor to figure out like the beating heart of the story. And I remember in the first round of edits with every single contributor, I would tell them, this is the message that I think that you're trying to say with this story, or this is what I think you're saying with this story. And like as always, I don't know everything, so correct me if I'm wrong and let me know like what it is that you're truly trying to say. And then I tailor all of my editorial direction to make sure that we're touching back on that main theme and helping that stand out and be stronger in every story. And like everybody really brought it on top of the fact that everyone picked a genre that really complemented their brand and their writing style. Like, for example, Chloe Gong chose the slasher genre. And I remember screaming when she responded and said that that was the genre that she wanted. So yeah, all of the stories feel like they're very deeply personal to not only the contributors, but also to me, because like I have a very special connection with every single story in this collection.
When you were getting back pieces, were there any surprising like resonances between stories or even similarities or differences? Like were you surprised by anything that was given to you?
Mhm. I was actually surprised at how well everything fit together in terms of so like a good because like we had a really good mix of story types, right? And everyone did an amazing job subverting the subgenres. So when we started out with this collection, I created a list of 20 classic subgenres of horror. And these are things like paranormal, post-apocalyptic survival, haunted houses, demonic possession. And so each contributor got to choose one, and then they had to subvert it in some new and exciting way. And so everybody did such a good job of like subverting their subgenres and giving me just like a good mix of stories. And it was just like it because we have slow burn horror like Farida's story, All Eyes on Me. Then we have more of the like whimsical like horror slash a little bit of comedy with Lamar Giles's The Protege, and then we have some that are like really thought provoking and it's like leave you kind of messed up at the end. And that would be HE's Best Served Cold and Kaylin Bayron's Hedge. And then you have some that are just like over the top, just like wild, which is like My Story, The Road to Hell, Nassim Jamnia's Break Through Our Skin, and Chloe Gong's Docile Girls. So like there's a good mix, and I feel like there's multiple stories that everybody will like. So there's something in this collection for everybody.
There truly is. Like you hit
Mm.
so many like really good subgenres and really like ones that are close to people. Like I love haunted house stories. And
Yes.
everybody's going to find something that's like really hits what they love and like get a
Mm.
new perspective into it, I think, and, really have the sort of staler, perhaps, more anachronistic tropes, like have them
Hmm.
jumbled up and like disposed of and stuff like that. It's a really neat
Yes.
approach.
Thank
Um,
you.
Welcome. Could you talk a little bit too about the piece that starts it off, the Ghoul Friends blog? Um, because I love it as a sort of framing narrative. It gives it like a sort
Mhm.
of urban legendy type feel, like, and it really plugs into, I think, like how the internet and horror kind of work together. So could you talk
Yes.
about like, did you have that frame for the collection going into it, or did you come up with that during the process? Like, how did that?
Mhm. So when I was working on the proposal with my editor, Allie Fisher, she suggested that we have a frame story to pull everything together. And so I came up with the concept of the frame story, which follows the unsung filmmaker Jacoby Warren, who created this collection of 13 films that were allegedly inspired by real life supernatural events. And he disappeared, and no one ever heard from him again. And all that he left with this collection of 13 reels of film was a handwritten note that said, "The white guy dies first." And someone in the horror community, or this kid in the horror community, has a blog called Ghoul Friends. And he is obsessed with Jacoby Warren, and he does a special post for the anniversary of Warren's disappearance. And it's interesting because you can see in this frame story and in this post in the beginning, like the way that this kid, like, really one appreciates Jacoby's artistry. And it's really cool because me as an artist myself, we might not get like all of the lists and the shiny gold accolades, but to me, what really matters the most is that there are people out there in the world that see us and see our art for what it is and how we intend it, and they just really connect with that. And it's important having that community and remembering them, because that is what keeps me going and fueled as an artist when it gets tough. So coming up, but of course, like everything that I do has a deeper meaning. So it was really cool for me to build that frame story for this collection, and then to link all of the stories together. And I won't give it away, no spoilers, but the frame story will explain why all of the bodies of the white guy that dies first in each of these 13 stories mysteriously disappears.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It really gives the collection a lot of cohesiveness, and it makes it feel so modern too, I think, because it does play
Mhm,
into like, kids on the internet do have a sort of really intense relationship sometimes with the like, the creepy pasta phenomenon and those
mhm,
blogs where you just like get really into these stories. Um, do you think we're living in a really good time for horror? Because there's so many good projects, not just in like literature and books, but on film too right now. Like, do you see
mhm.
things going in a good direction for horror in terms of like inclusion and representation, or what are your feelings in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like we're making progress, while I don't feel like we're making progress as quickly as we should be or we could be. However, I do feel like horror is having a moment right now, and I think it might also be related to the state of the world and everything going on. And like, not only is horror an escape, but it's a way that it's almost like a bit of catharsis for us to like see these characters in like on screen and in these scenes, like conquering these larger than life, like monsters or spirits or entities that just seem insurmountable, right? And so like it speaks to what we're going through in our daily lives and like the powerlessness that we feel with like, all the, just for example, all of the genocide happening around the world. And just like, especially being an American, and whose tax dollars is like funding this, and feeling like so powerless to do anything about it. So like that artistry really speaks to like the human experience of being alive right now.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that that does speak to how relevant horror can be, because horror does so often give voice to people who are being oppressed, whether that's like
Hmm.
metaphorically in the sort of supernatural sense or like within like a lived social horror type thing. So yeah, I think it's like a really great moment for us to have all these voices, both on film and like in literature. And I'm so, thankful for you for bringing this project to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you feel like editing has changed your writing process or your perspective on writing? Like, do you see any sort of relationship between the two activities?
Absolutely. I love editing because it provides an alternative perspective to the writing process. And for me, I'm the type of person who like believes in continual improvement, and I love learning That's probably like a bit of my neurodivergence, but like I am just always infatuated with learning. And that's why I love, like, my friends call me the story whisperer, because all of them know, like, if they get stuck on a manuscript or something, they call me and like we will run through like the scenario, the scene, and what's going on. And I just like help them work through it. And that's so fun to me, because it provides an alternative perspective of like how to build a story and how to analyze like when something doesn't feel right or something not working, and diagnose why, and then come up with a way to fix it. And so that helps me when I'm on the other side and I'm working on my own projects, and like I might hit a snag, or even when I'm like building and planning a project, like I know it helps me know how to think about how to structure it properly. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a nice balance too for the parts of writing that can be very like that can feel very isolating or feel like you're spending
Hmm.
a lot of time in your own head. Like editing can like create connection between like you and readers and other writers and stuff like that. And it makes it a little bit more
Hmm.
collaborative, which I think is also demonstrated really nicely in this volume.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, one thing I can say, like, I really enjoyed editing this anthology. And I remember I told all of the contributors, I was like, I am very intense as an editor. And I was like, I'm going to push you all, but like, I still want everybody to have fun. And I want this to be a really good experience. And I always tell people as well who I'm editing, I'm like, because if I'm really into your story, I'm going to give you a ton of notes. And I was like, the quantity of notes that I give is not indicative of your skill, but more so like my engagement. And if I give you a lot of notes, I'm like really dialed in to the story and what you're doing. And every single person rose to the challenge. And a lot of the contributors just like exceeded our expectations of like what we were asking for working with them editorially. And I think because like the both myself and Allie built such a good rapport with everyone, with like how we approached the project and just how we like made it more of like a collaborative experience. Like everybody had fun. And I feel like it really shows in everyone's story, like that joy, that genuine joy that they had working on this project, like shows in each one of their stories.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. It is such a beautiful collection. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
I'm so glad it's in the world.
Yeah,
Um,
me too. I'm so excited for more people to read this.
and so I know, you already have two books out in the world this year so far. Um, and so, that's enough for any one person in one year. But are you working on anything else? Like what is next on your
Mhm.
horizon?
Yes, so I am working on, well, right now, I'm working on 3 projects right now. So I am currently writing the finale of the Alex Wise trilogy, and that's a very bittersweet project 'cause I'm having so much fun, but I don't want to say goodbye to my apocalypse children. I love them so much. And I'm also working on an adult romantasy that we haven't announced yet, but I can't say too much about it. However, it's inspired by The Last Unicorn, and it is a Black queer romance story, and it's a high fantasy. And I'm also drafting an adult psychological horror. That's all I can tell you because it's not sold yet, but I'm so excited about it. And it's my first full-length horror novel.
That is so exciting. All right, those all sound like really incredibly exciting projects. So if you're always welcome back to the show if you ever want to come back and talk about any of those. I know for a fact we have a lot of Last Unicorn
Mhm.
fans and Romantasy fans here. So like
Yes, please. So the answer is yes. It's
yeah.
just, and then the next question is when.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you again for joining us and sharing this with us. I really am so excited for our listeners and our patrons to check it out.
Yeah, thank you. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you.
Oh, thanks. Hey, listeners, please go check out The White Guy Dies First. When you hear this, it will be out in the world. So please go to your favorite library or independent bookstore, wherever you like to go for books. All right. Thank you. It's time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.